Hey guys, tonight we're slipping behind the perfectly arranged curtains of Regency London, past the white muslin gowns and the strategically dampened hems, into a world that officially believed women had no legal existence and unofficially ran entirely on what those women were doing when their husbands were at the club. Not the Jane Austen version. Not the bonnets and longing version. The one with ciphered letters routed through footmen, sheep intestine contraceptive sold near Covent Garden for £1, and a duchess quietly running a ménage à trois out of one of the most famous houses in London. If this is the kind of late-night history that quiets your brain, the like and subscribe buttons are right there, and only if it actually does. Sincere thanks to every viewer who suggested this topic. You all have excellent taste and, evidently, at least one well-kept secret apiece. Drop a comment telling me where you're watching from and what time it is for you. Someone is reading this at 3:15 in their kitchen, which is the appropriate hour for any sensible story about coverture. Lower the lamp, settle the blanket, and let your feet find the warm corner of the bed, and perhaps don't leave any coded letters lying around on the nightstand. Curious how a woman who legally did not exist managed to conduct an entire parallel life, with correspondence, cash, and a carriage, inside a house her husband technically owned in full. How did you maintain a secret when your lady's maid, your footman, your coachman, and the woman who dressed your hair all knew exactly where you were going? What did a Mayfair boudoir actually smell like at 11 o'clock on a winter morning when someone who wasn't your husband was expected? Could you survive a society where a crim con trial aired your bedsheets literally to an audience of thousands reading the pamphlet over breakfast, the dark walks at Vauxhall, the domino cloak? And seriously, who was managing the logistics when Lady Caroline Lamb mailed Lord Byron a lock of hair that was not from her head? Congratulations! You've just woken up in Mayfair, London, 1813. The coal fire is going, the beeswax candles smell like warm honey and mild regret, and someone downstairs is pretending very hard not to know what they know. Good luck. You are 17 years old, and your mother has not slept in 3 weeks. The Queen's drawing room is tomorrow, and your court train is 6 yards long, and the ostrich feathers in your headdress are the wrong shade of white. You have practiced the curtsy 300 times against a wall. You will perform it once, in front of the monarch, while walking backwards, while not stepping on your own hem, while your future husband, whoever he turns out to be, watches from somewhere in the crowd. The future husband. You haven't met him yet. That's fine, that's normal. He will be selected through a process that resembles a merger negotiation conducted entirely in drawing rooms, and your opinion of the merger is not one of the required documents. Your father talks to his father, or his solicitor, or possibly his land agent, depending on whether the estate is entailed. The settlement is drawn up, the jointure is agreed, the pin money is written in somewhere between £200 and £1,000 a year, depending on what your family can command at the table. You sign nothing. You are not yet a party to your own arrangements. Your mother adjusts the ostrich feathers 1/4 of an inch to the left and steps back, breathing out. The Queen is present at the drawing room, but the curtsy is for every mother in the room, every prospective family scanning the line. You bow once. The feathers don't fall. Lady Bessborough, halfway down the room, marks you in her head the way a butcher marks a hanging carcass, practical, polite, and quietly thorough. The curtsy takes about 4 seconds. The processing takes the rest of your life. Lord Ashford. Let's say that's who ends up across the settlement table is 34, or perhaps 40. Or perhaps the number doesn't come up until the papers are nearly signed. He has a house in Mayfair and a larger house in Derbyshire, and an entailed problem his solicitor describes as manageable. Your mother describes him as distinguished. He is distinguished. He is also not someone you have spoken to for longer than 20 minutes at any given assembly, and he has a laugh that sounds like a door with a loose hinge. You will share a name with him by Tuesday. The marriage takes place in spring. It is a good match. Everyone says so at breakfast. The announcement appears in the Morning Post. Your new monogram appears on the stationery. Your old name goes somewhere quiet, like a dress that no longer fits folded, set aside, not exactly gone, but no longer relevant to proceedings. Of course, legally, it is more than that. Under the doctrine of coverture, your legal identity does not get folded away politely. It gets absorbed. You cannot own property after the ceremony. You cannot sign a contract. You cannot sue. You cannot keep your own earnings should you somehow have any. What was yours before the altar is now his, along with you, because the law has decided that a husband and wife are one person, and that person is him. The debt doesn't pause while you recover from the journey to Derbyshire. It has no concept of a honeymoon period, neither does the law. A lady in the next county older, married for 12 years, the kind of woman who knows things catches your eye at your first county assembly and nods once, very slowly. The nod contains everything she is not going to tell you out loud. You file it for later. You curtsy to her husband. You smile at yours. The candles in the room are doing their best. There are 24 of them, and the room is still mostly dark. You are in the next room while your father and a man you have met twice negotiate the rest of your life. The document on the table is a settlement. It specifies the dowry you bring, the jointure you receive if widowed, and a third figure called pin money, a yearly allowance, paid quarterly, that will technically be yours. The number is being argued over now. Your preferences have not been requested. They are not expected to be. The settlement is a long document. It covers land, income from entailed estates, and the annual sum your father will continue paying toward household expenses once you're married. Your solicitor and his solicitor have met 3 times already. Nobody has asked you anything except whether you take milk in your tea. You do. This has not been recorded. Underneath the legal language, the settlement is one thing. It is a transfer agreement. Your father transfers you along with your dowry, your connections, and your future children to your husband. Your husband assumes responsibility for your debts, your conduct, and your legal existence. From the morning of your wedding, you do not technically exist under English law as a separate person. You cannot own property, you cannot sign a contract, you cannot sue anyone or be sued independently. If you earn money, which you won't, because that is not something a woman of your class does, your husband owns it the moment it arrives. Coverture, they call it. From the Latin for covered, you are covered. Thoroughly. The pin money figure matters more than anyone in that room is saying out loud. It's the one line in the document that belongs to you in practice, even if not quite in law. The number your father is arguing for right now, somewhere between £200 and £1,000 a year, depending on the prestige of the match and the stubbornness of both fathers, will be the only cash you control that isn't technically his. Pin money is the only line in the household ledger your husband cannot legally read. The cheque arrives quarterly from the steward. The drawer in the writing desk has a key, and the key lives on the chain around your neck. £200 a year is roughly £15,000 today. 1,000 is 75,000. The gap between those two numbers is the gap between surviving your marriage quietly and conducting it on your own terms. A solicitor named Mr. Finch sits at the table. He represents your future husband's interests. He is eating an orange from his coat pocket while reading a clause aloud. He doesn't stop for the orange. He just works around it, narrating your legal disappearance with citrus on his fingers. Now, the jointure clause, what you receive if your husband dies first, is also being negotiated. This is the part your mother cares about most. She has mentioned it 4 times at breakfast this week, and once during a fitting for your walking dress. The jointure is usually tied to the size of your dowry, roughly 5% annually on the capital sum paid from the estate. If you bring £10,000 to the marriage and he dies in year 3, you receive £500 a year for the rest of your life. Not lavish, sustainable, enough to live quietly in Bath with 1 servant and a small dog and your reputation largely intact, which is the best possible outcome your mother can imagine for you, and she is not wrong to imagine it. The document takes another hour. Voices rise once over the pin money figure and then settle. Someone calls for more coal. The fire in the next room has gone low, and you can hear it being attended to the scrape of the poker, the clunk of a scuttle while the men agree on your annual allowance with slightly less ceremony than they'd give to a disputed invoice. You will sign the settlement tomorrow. One of the few times your signature is legally required for anything concerning your own life. After that, the document goes into a strongbox, the solicitors go home, and you go into a marriage that has been measured, priced, and filed in triplicate. The pin money arrives on the 1st of January, April, July, and October. It is the only part of this arrangement that will ever feel like yours. The orange smell lingers in the hall for the rest of the evening. You are dressed by 9 for a ball that begins at 10 in a building on King Street whose only product is a Wednesday. The lady patronesses have voted on you. Lady Jersey was for. Lady Cowper was against. Princess Esterhazy was undecided and was therefore, in practice, for. The voucher has arrived in your hand. You may attend. You are not allowed to bring a friend who has not also been voted on. Let's talk about the voucher. It's not a ticket. It's a judgment. The lady patronesses Jersey, Cowper, Esterhazy, Countess Leven and 3 others who rotate through the role with the gravity of Supreme Court justices issue them on a logic that is never explained. A duke's daughter has been turned away last Wednesday. A duchess was blackballed the season before. No reasons given. No appeal. This is basically the Soho House Membership Committee, except the rejection ends your daughter's marriage prospects, and possibly hers, and possibly her daughter's. Almack's itself is, by most accounts, a mild disappointment in person. The rooms are adequate. The refreshments, weak lemonade, bread and butter, thin cake are considerably worse than what you had at home before you left. The orchestra is competent. Someone has told you the floors are good, and the floors are, in fact, good. But you did not wear this gown, which cost more than a minor civil servant earns in a year, to admire a floor. You came, because being here means you are the kind of person who is here. The absence of that distinction is the thing no one recovers from gracefully. A footman named Draper stands near the entrance with the particular stillness of a man who has been trained to see nothing and is seeing everything. He takes your wrap. He returns it at the end of the evening. In between, Draper watches every arrival, every departure, every whispered exchange near the window seat where Lady Jersey is holding court while pretending not to hold court. Draper has worked this room for 11 seasons. He knows which gentlemen arrive late and which ones arrive early and which ones arrive twice in the same evening with different expressions. He will not say any of this to anyone. He is paid to carry things. Now, the dancing. You dance. You are watched while you dance. Who asks you, in what order, for how long, and whether you appear to enjoy it more than is strictly correct? All of this is being catalogued by women who appear to be discussing the weather. A gentleman may ask you twice without it meaning anything. A third dance with the same partner means something. What it means depends entirely on who is watching, and everyone is watching. You are aware of this the way you are aware of your own spine, constantly, involuntarily, and without any practical ability to make it stop. The supper room is through a door. The door has a corridor. The corridor has a corner. The corner is technically part of Almack's, and therefore entirely respectable, and also, in practice, approximately 4 feet outside the line of sight of the main floor. You know this. The gentleman who asked you twice knows this. Lady Cowper, who voted against you, almost certainly also knows this. Draper, at the entrance, watches the corridor with the same fixed stillness he has worn all evening. He does not turn his head when you pass. You are at home between 11 and 1, which is when London comes to visit you. Callers leave cards in a silver tray on a hall table the size of a small altar. Those you wish to receive are shown upstairs to a room called your boudoir, which is borrowed French and means, with some accuracy, your sulking room. It is where you have your most private conversations. It is also where most of your private conversations are accidentally overheard. The boudoir is small by the standards of the house, maybe 12 feet across, hung in pale silk that has gone slightly yellow from candle smoke, furnished with a chaise longue, 2 chairs, and a writing desk whose locked drawer contains things the writing desk has opinions about. A coal fire keeps the room at something approaching warm. The smell is beeswax, hungry water, the faint animal note of a fur-trimmed pelisse draped over the chair back, and coal smoke. Not unpleasant. Just very specifically there, the way a room smells when someone has been living a complicated life in it. Let's talk about the morning call. It is not a social call. It is a social call, officially, in the same way that a chess opening is officially just moving a piece. You receive 3 or 4 visitors between 11 and 1. You pour nothing, no tea, no wine, nothing that would require a servant to enter the room with a tray and linger. The conversation is rapid, low, and coded. Missus, Fitzwilliam mentions that Colonel Haverstock was seen at the Italian Opera on Thursday. You mention that you also attended the Italian Opera on Thursday. Nobody remarks on this. The visit lasts 20 minutes. Mrs. Fitzwilliam leaves. You both know exactly what was communicated. Your lady's maid, Agnes, stands outside the boudoir door during all of this. She is not eavesdropping. She is simply positioned 6 inches from the door for reasons that are entirely her own business. Agnes has been with you since you were 19. She has carried notes in her glove, received notes in her glove, and returned from errands having forgotten the address she went to, the street, and, if asked, the day of the week. Agnes is the most expensive item in your household that doesn't appear on any household ledger. She is paid in loyalty, in a room of her own, and in the understanding that what happens in the boudoir stays in the boudoir with the structural reliability of a Swiss vault. Agnes is watchful, patient, and quietly thorough. The Swiss vault, in this case, also does your hair. Notes arrive between calls. A footman, not draper, a different one whose hiring you supervise personally, delivers a folded paper with no outer address. The paper has been through 3 hands before yours, the sender's manservant, a trusted intermediary on Curzon Street, and then your man, who received it with the expression of someone accepting a perfectly ordinary domestic object. The note itself is short, perhaps 8 words, perhaps only 4. The handwriting is careful in the way handwriting is careful when someone has thought about what happens if this is ever read aloud in a courtroom. Agnes adjusts a candlestick on the side table. The candlestick did not need adjusting. Your husband is at his club, which opens at 10 and becomes progressively more absorbing as the morning advances. Parliament, if it's sitting, takes him until late afternoon. The country estate requires his attention only in writing, which he attends to at his desk in the library, 1 floor below and on the other side of the house. Between 11 and 1, the boudoir is, for practical purposes, another jurisdiction entirely. A jurisdiction with a coal fire, a chaise longue, and a door Agnes is standing very close to for reasons of her own. You are in the open carriage between 4 and 6 in the afternoon, and your only job is to be visible. The route is Rotten Row and the drive. The pace is a walk. You nod to the people who must be nodded to, you cut the people who must be cut, and you do both with the same expression. Every nod and every cut will be reported in 3 drawing rooms by evening. The hour exists for this reporting. The carriage itself is a statement before you've opened your mouth. An open barouche says you have nothing to hide, which is the correct thing for it to say. A closed carriage, rolling through Hyde Park at 4 in the afternoon, says approximately the opposite. It says you are conducting a conversation in a box, which everyone will note and several people will speculate about before the horses have reached the gate. You are in the open barouche. You have chosen visibility as your alibi. Let's talk about who's watching. Every other carriage rolling the same loop is doing the same calculation you are, which makes Hyde Park at 4:30 less like a pleasant afternoon out and more like a mutual surveillance operation with very nice horses. Lord and Lady somebody from Grosvenor Square are rolling the circuit with their eldest daughter, who has been presented and needs to be seen looking marriageable and uncomplicated. The Honourable Mrs. Cartwright Finch call her Dorothea, though she'd prefer you didn't pass as your carriage going the other direction, catches your eye for exactly 1/4 of a second, and does not nod. You file this away. You will think about it until Thursday. The morning call confirmed. The evening assembly will confirm again. Hyde Park at 4 is the one moment of the day when you are both genuinely outside and completely exposed, which is a particular kind of pressure that the English have somehow decided to categorize as leisure. A groom named Edward sits behind you on the back of the carriage with the expression of a man who has heard everything and retained none of it on principle. Edward is watchful, steady, and reliably discreet. He adjusts the rug across your knees once, and only once. The person you must not look for is already somewhere on the drive. You know this because the arrangement was made during morning calls 3 days ago, via a note that passed through 2 hands before it reached yours, and because you know the colour of his curricle. You do not look for the curricle. You look at Dorothea's carriage retreating in the opposite direction and maintain your expression. The drive is long enough that you will pass him twice on the circuit without engineering anything. A society that runs on appearances has quietly engineered all the necessary infrastructures for bypassing them, and Hyde Park at 4 is one of those infrastructures, dressed up as fresh air. Of course, the nod you exchange when the curricle passes is meaningless to the 14 people who observe it. You have known each other for 2 seasons. A nod is correct. 2 nods would be noted. A pause, any slowing of either vehicle, any turning of either head is a different register entirely, and would be reported in those same 3 drawing rooms alongside the cuts and the nodding. You do not pause. Neither does the curricle. The entire exchange takes 4 seconds and contains more information than a letter. A footman named Gilbert, 2 households over, is currently waiting at the Stanhope Gate with a folded note inside his left glove. He has been waiting since 3. He will wait until you pass, hand it to Edward without breaking his posture, and return to his employer's house having gone for a walk. Gilbert has never in his professional life gone for a walk. The note has a time on it, nothing else. Receipts aren't invented in any form useful to either of you, and that is exactly how it should be. By 5 o'clock, the drive is thick enough with carriages that the circuit has slowed to something close to standing still, and this crowding is not inconvenient. It's useful. You are visible to 30 people simultaneously. Nobody can be sure of what you said to whom. The collective alibi of the crowd is everyone's alibi. You lean slightly forward to acknowledge Lady Thornton Vere, who is aggressively boring and therefore excellent to be seen with. She smiles. You smile back. 45 minutes more and you'll be home in time to change for evening. You are interviewing a woman who will dress you, undress you, sleep in the room next to yours, and know every cipher in your writing case. References are produced. The previous mistress writes that she is honest, sober, and discreet. The word discreet is doing a great deal of work in that sentence. You ask her about her last position. She tells you the parts you are allowed to hear, and you understand exactly the things you are not. Let's talk about what you're actually hiring. Not a lady's maid. You're hiring an infrastructure. A loyal lady's maid is the only person in the house who sees you at 6 in the morning, knows when you've been crying, can tell by the state of your hair whether something went wrong at the Pantheon last Tuesday, and will carry a folded note through 3 rooms and 4 corridors and hand it to a footman with the casual efficiency of someone who is simply walking somewhere for no reason at all. She's the original disappearing courier, a ghost with access to your wardrobe. The reference letter is the interview. Everything after is confirmation. What you're looking for is not skill. Any adequate woman can dress hair and press muslin, but a specific quality of silence. Not the silence of someone who doesn't notice. The silence of someone who notices everything and chooses, continuously, not to speak. That distinction matters enormously. Your PIN money contractually written into the marriage settlement, legally the only cash in this house that belongs to something resembling you runs somewhere between £200 and £1,000 a year, depending on what your father negotiated before the ink dried on the settlement. In practice, a portion of it goes toward wages, small gifts, and the kind of quiet arrangements that don't appear on any household ledger. Your lady's maid earns perhaps £14 to £20 a year in formal wages. You are going to supplement that informally in ways that create a private economy between you, invisible to your husband, the housekeeper, and everyone else. The supplement is not a bribe. It's a salary for a second job she's never been formally offered and has already agreed to perform. A woman named Margaret is sitting across from you now, hands in her lap, eyes steady. She does not fidget. That's good. A fidgeting lady's maid is a woman whose nerves are ahead of her judgment, and judgment is the only quality that actually matters in this room. You notice that her references cover 4 years with Lady Ashton and 2 years before that with someone whose name she gives quietly, without elaboration. You do not ask for elaboration. The name is enough. You know that household. You know what that household required. Of course, there are practical skills. A good lady's maid can dress hair in the French style, press a silk gown without scorching, identify the correct Hungary water from 3 bottles, and repair a torn hem in 20 minutes, so that nothing about your appearance suggests you were recently not where you said you were. These are the listed qualifications. They are not the actual qualifications. The actual qualifications are: can she tell which notes to burn and which to keep? Can she answer the door to a morning caller with a face that conveys you are at home when you are not, and not at home when you are? Can she distinguish between the footman who is simply delivering correspondence and the footman who is delivering correspondence that should arrive without being logged? She can. You can see it. It's in the particular quality of her stillness, the posture of someone who has already, in every room she's ever worked in, been the last person to leave and the first to know. You tell her the position is 30 shillings above the standard rate. She accepts without expression. Both of you understand what the extra 30 shillings is for, and neither of you will ever say it aloud. That's the interview. That's the hire. Margaret straightens the reference letters into a small, precise stack on the table between you and says nothing further. The stack is very neat. It suggests she has been here before. You are writing a letter that cannot go through the post. The post is opened in London by clerks employed by the Secretary of State. This is not a rumour, this is a job description. The man you require for the carrying is in livery at the bottom of the staircase. He has been with the household for 9 years. His wages were raised twice last quarter, both times by you, both times without explanation. He has never asked for one. Let's talk about Thomas. Thomas is the second footman. He carries a sealed letter across Mayfair in under 12 minutes on a dry morning and in under 14 in the rain, because he has done this enough times to know which streets pool. He hands it to the door in Brook Street with the specific posture of a man delivering something entirely ordinary. He does not make eye contact with the butler who receives it. Eye contact is for people with questions, and Thomas does not have questions. He goes back down the servants' entrance before the clock in the hall has finished striking. The townhouse was not designed for scandal, it was designed for class. The results are functionally identical. Back staircases run from the kitchens to the upper floors without crossing the front of the house at all. A visitor can arrive at the servants' entrance on the side street, be shown up the back stairs, reach a private sitting room on the first floor, and leave the same way without once appearing in the main hall. The house does this for coal deliveries, for wine, for staff, for whatever you need it to do. The staircase is narrow, dark, and reliably uncurious. It does not ask. The coachman is a separate matter. John Stokes has driven for this family since before your marriage, which means he has driven for longer than he has known you as the woman you now are. When you instruct him to take you to an address in Bloomsbury, not a fashionable address, just an address, he writes it nowhere. He tells no one. He waits outside for however long the visit requires, reads nothing because he cannot read, and brings you home before your husband's carriage is expected back from St. James's. John Stokes earns £14 a year. He also receives, from time to time, a small gratuity pressed into his hand at the bottom of the mews stairs, folded twice, not counted in front of you. This is not a bribe. It is more like a salary for a second job that was never formally posted. Of course Margaret knows. Margaret, whom you hired 3 weeks ago at 30 shillings above the standard rate for reasons neither of you have articulated, knows everything that happens on your floor of the house. She pressed the gown you wore to the address in Bloomsbury. She noticed the mud on the hem when you returned. She removed it before anyone else could form an opinion about it. The mud is gone. The opinion never existed. This network, footman, coachman, lady's maid, is basically a logistics operation with a very strict NDA and no org chart. It functions because everyone in it has calculated, without meeting to discuss the matter, that loyalty is worth more than disclosure. John Stokes turns the carriage into the mews at the same minute every Tuesday. Margaret folds the gown over her arm and walks it past the housekeeper without slowing down. The letters themselves take some care. Short sentences are safer than long ones. You write in a hand slightly different from your usual, not dramatically different, just compressed, the way handwriting gets when you are writing fast and also thinking. Some correspondences use a simple substitution, a name replaced by initials, a location described only as the usual arrangement. A sealed letter carried by Thomas looks like any of the dozen sealed letters that move between households in Mayfair on any given morning. Invitations, acceptances, regrets. The post office clerks never see it. Thomas moves faster than suspicion and quieter than gossip, which, in this part of London, is the only speed that counts. You are climbing into a closed carriage at 11:30 in the morning, alone, in a bonnet that is deliberately too large. The coachman has been told the address. He has not been told the name of the person at the address. He will deliver you, wait at a discreet distance, and bring you home in time for luncheon. Tomorrow, if a footman from another household inquires about your whereabouts this morning, he will recall a quiet trip to a haberdasher's. The carriage itself is doing significant work. Closed, it hides your face. Moving, it removes you from the geography of your own household. The curtain on the interior window is drawn, which is not suspicious. It's cold, it's winter. The curtain is always drawn in winter. The bonnet is large because large bonnets existed, and because a woman in a large bonnet, seen from a distance, is simply a woman in a bonnet, which is not information. You have dressed for anonymity the way a professional dresses for an interview, deliberately, without appearing to. The pin money allowance written into your marriage settlement the way a parking space is written into a lease runs somewhere between £200 and £1,000 a year. That's £15,000 to £75,000 in modern terms, arriving in quarterly instalments spent on whatever a wife requires for her personal maintenance. Gloves, ribbons, letters. Carriage rides to haberdashers that are not haberdashers. Your husband cannot legally demand an accounting. The allowance is yours by contract. It is the one financial fact of your life that coverture does not absorb, which makes it, in practice, the operational budget for everything you are not supposed to be doing. The address you're going to is in a street one remove from fashionable, not Mayfair, not St. James's. Somewhere that requires an explanation if you are seen, and where you probably won't be seen, because people who live in Mayfair don't walk past streets one remove from fashionable unless they are also going somewhere they'd prefer not to discuss. The house has a front door and a back door. You will use the front door, because using the back door would be conspicuous. The front door opens inward. You step through it quickly. The bonnet comes off. A housekeeper named Mrs. Aldridge takes it from you without comment. She has been taking it from you without comment for 11 months. She folds it over her arm with the practiced indifference of someone who has developed a very specific professional philosophy, which is that she has seen nothing, will continue to see nothing, and has been compensated at a rate that makes nothing the correct amount to see. Mrs. Aldridge is neat, level, and quietly thorough. She is, functionally, a human curtain. She is also, it must be said, extremely good at her job. Morning visiting hours run from 11 to 3. Your husband is at his club, or in Parliament, or on the estate in Wiltshire, wherever a man of property goes when he is not watching you. Mrs. Aldridge knows this. She has built her week around it. The note arranging this visit was written in a cipher, not an elaborate one, just a private system, a substitution of agreed-upon words that would read as an ordinary social inquiry to anyone who opened it without permission. It was carried by a third party, not by Thomas, because Thomas is your household's footman and his face is known. A separate messenger was used. That messenger does not know what the note said. He was told only the address and given a coin. He has already forgotten the address, because coins work that way. You have, in short, moved through this city this morning leaving almost nothing behind you. A coachman with a selective memory, a housekeeper with a professional philosophy, a note written in a code that any casual reader would find boring. The only record that you are here is the impression your feet made in the hallway floor, and those will be gone by the time Mrs. Aldridge sweeps through at 4. By luncheon you are home. The bonnet is back on the hook. The carriage is in the mews. The coachman, if asked, recalls the haberdashers. He doesn't specify which one. And you are sitting at a writing desk with a small leather book open to the current quarter. The page records the £125 that arrived from your husband's steward on Lady Day, and the items it has paid for since: a milliner, a glover, 2 charity subscriptions, and a sum entered only as cash. The cash column is the one that matters. It is the only money in the household that nobody asks you to itemize. In legal theory, it is still your husband's. In practice, it is the only money in your life. Pin money was written into the marriage settlement before the wedding, negotiated between your father's solicitor and your husband's solicitor while you were presumably somewhere nearby learning embroidery. The amount varied, £200 a year at the modest end, £1,000 at the top, which in today's terms runs roughly £15,000 to £75,000 annually. It was contractual, it was expected, and it was, by unspoken convention, the one financial instrument in a married woman's life that didn't come with a receipt requirement. Your husband can audit the linen inventory. He cannot audit the cash column. The cash column knows this about itself. What the cash actually buys. Not the milliner, not the gloves. The gloves are cover. The cash pays for the note sent by hand rather than the penny post, because a note sent by the penny post has a delivery record and a postman who knows your street. The cash pays for the extra half-crown pressed into your lady's maid's hand on a Tuesday morning when she needs to carry something to an address in Jermyn Street without asking why. The cash pays for a hackney rather than your husband's crested carriage, because a crested carriage is basically a monogram on wheels and everyone on the street can read it. Your lady's maid, whose name is Fletcher and who has an expression of permanent serene blandness that you have come to recognize as professional discretion at its highest form, accepts the coin with both hands, tucks it into her apron, and does not make eye contact. Fletcher is calm, capable, and reliably forgetful. She has been with you for 6 years and has misplaced more addresses than most people have ever learned. She receives her wage from your husband's account, her loyalty from yours, and she has clearly done the arithmetic on which one matters more. A good lady's maid in this arrangement is less a personal attendant and more a one-woman logistics operation with excellent posture. The quarter-day system helps. Your pin money arrives 4 times a year, Lady Day in March, Midsummer in June, Michaelmas in September, Michaelmas's autumn counterpart in December, in predictable instalments from the steward, who hands it over without comment, because commenting is not part of his function. This means your private economy runs on a quarterly cycle, which is a little like modern expense reporting, except nobody ever sees the expenses. You plan accordingly. A busy spring season requires more cash than a quiet winter. Parliamentary recesses, when your husband is home and attentive and less easily accounted for, require a different kind of planning altogether. Georgiana, Duchess of Devonshire, understood the cash problem better than almost anyone, though she solved it in the opposite direction. Her gambling debts ran past £100,000, somewhere near £8 million today, concealed from her husband for years through a combination of borrowed money, private IOUs, and strategic vagueness. The pin money helped, until it didn't. And then she borrowed against future pin money, which is the financial equivalent of eating tomorrow's dinner tonight and hoping nobody notices. Her husband eventually noticed. The reckoning was not comfortable. Still, the structure of pin money as a private financial instrument was the foundation of the whole operation, even when the operation collapsed spectacularly. Back to your leather book. You close it. The cash entry stays as it is, just cash. The entry doesn't explain itself, and neither do you. Your steward will carry the next quarter's instalment in 6 weeks. Until then you have £11 and some shillings left, which is enough for what you need, and precisely not enough for anything you can't justify. The ledger has the same handwriting on every page. Fletcher sets a fresh candle on the desk and leaves the room without speaking. You are at your desk after the household has gone quiet, with a sheet of paper, a quill, and a small key drawn on the inside cover of your prayer book. Vowels are replaced by symbols. Certain proper names are replaced by birds. The man you are writing to has the same key in his own prayer book, and will read your letter at a desk like yours, in a room like yours. The pleasure of writing it is, in part, the cipher. The danger of writing it is also the cipher. The letter itself is not long. It doesn't need to be. 3 sentences in plain text: the weather, your health, the usual courtesies, and then the rest in symbols. Bird names. And a punctuation system you invented together on an afternoon that you don't think about directly anymore. The wax seal goes on last. You choose the plain one, not the crest. The crest has opinions about record keeping. Now, getting it out of the house. Fletcher takes it, folded into her apron with the practiced invisibility of someone who has been doing this long enough that her face no longer changes when you hand her something. She doesn't walk to the post. She finds a boy, not the regular hall boy, a different boy, encountered at a specific corner, and the letter moves from there by a route you have never asked about and genuinely prefer not to know. Your coachman, Thomas, calls this going by the long way. Thomas has been going by the long way for 11 years. He is the most discreet man in London. He is also the most expensive. Anne Lister of Shibden Hall, up in Halifax, solved the problem differently. She didn't route her letters through servants or corners or boys with specific instructions. She encrypted 4 million words directly in her diary, a sixth of them in a cipher of her own invention, built from Greek letters, mathematical symbols, and punctuation marks snapped together into a code that nobody decoded until the 20th century. While she was alive, the diary sat on her shelf in plain sight. Visitors saw it. Nobody read it. It looked, from the outside, like a very serious woman doing very serious accounting. She was, in a sense, not wrong. Most women don't have Anne Lister's systematic patience. Most women are working with a simpler arrangement, a key, a prayer book, and the understanding that the cipher only works if the other person keeps his copy somewhere his valet won't find it. This is the weakest point in the whole operation, and you know it, and there is nothing you can do about it. You have trusted him with the key. The key is the thing. Mr. Gerald Ashworth, that's his name in the letter, rendered as the woodcock folds his incoming correspondence into a particular volume of Tacitus that lives spine out on the third shelf, left of centre. His library has 1,400 books. The Tacitus is the one that doesn't collect dust. His librarian, a thin man named Poole who notices everything and says nothing, dusts around it with the care of someone who has long since decided that certain shelves are not his department. Poole is thin, careful, and professionally indifferent. He sets the feather back down and moves on. He has always moved on. It is one of his better qualities. Back at your desk, you read his last letter back to you. The woodcock has written that the heron will be in town for Michaelmas. The heron is you. Michaelmas is September 29th. You know what in town means, and it isn't the drawing room. You fold the letter once, then again, then into the candle flame. The paper catches immediately. The flame doesn't wait. You watch it go, the vowels, the bird names, the punctuation mark intimacies, all of it, down to a curl of ash at the edge of the dish. The room is dim. A dozen candles, and the light barely reaches the far wall. In this kind of light, you notice, things are very easy to burn. You are folding the letter into thirds, then into a small rectangle, then dripping wax along the seam from a stick of red sealing wax. The wax has a particular shade, not the household's regular red, which carries your husband's arms, but a lighter colour you keep in your own writing case for letters of this kind. The signet you press into the wax is a flower. The flower is not in your family's armorial. The flower is your business and his. The letter itself took 40 minutes to write. Not because the content was complicated, but because it had to say nothing while meaning everything. You've confirmed a time. You've asked about the health of his aunt, who does not exist. You've referenced a book you both supposedly discussed, which is not a book. Every sentence is a surface. What's underneath is the actual letter, and that one lives only in the two of you. The aunt is doing well. You'll both be pleased to hear it. Now the mechanics begin. You don't walk this to the front door. The front hall is for official correspondence, invitations, bills, the replies to things that are meant to be replied to. Your letter goes to your maid, Margaret, who receives it without looking at it, folds it into the interior of her apron, and carries it to a boy she knows on the next street. Margaret has a talent for looking at the middle distance while doing significant things. Her face is flat, steady, and reliably unsurprised. She did the same face when she renegotiated her own wages with your housekeeper. The boy takes the letter to a bookshop in Jermyn Street, where it waits behind the counter under a false name until he collects it. Your name appears nowhere on the envelope. The bookshop has no idea what it's facilitating. It thinks it's a bookshop. It is a bookshop. It's also one of the more reliable message routing operations in the West End, staffed entirely by people whose professional survival depends on not noticing things. Timing matters. The letter needs to arrive during the hours when he is actually in a position to read it privately, which means before noon, when the clubs fill up and valets hover. An afternoon delivery means it sits in the pile with everything else, and everything else has eyes on it. Morning is the window. The whole correspondence system runs on a schedule tighter than the mail coach, and about as forgiving if you miss it. Of course, the letter might not arrive at all. Margaret's boy is reliable until he isn't. The bookshop might be closed. The wax might have cracked in transit enough to suggest the seal was interfered with, which would require a whole separate calculation about who interfered and what they now know. There are layers to this, and you are always on the outermost one, pressing a flower into warm wax and hoping the rest holds. Meanwhile, your pin money has covered the wax, the paper, the private writing case, and Margaret's quarterly bonus, which you both agree is for excellent service, and which it is, in the sense that all of this is a form of service. The pin money runs to £400 a year. Your husband authorised it in the marriage settlement and has never once asked what it covers. The wax is sixpence a stick. You go through one a month. The economics are fine. A footman appears at the door of the writing room to inform you that your morning callers have begun arriving. You close the writing case. You arrange your face into the expression that faces inward toward nothing at all. The flower seal is already cooling. The letter is already gone. In an hour, it will be in Jermyn Street, and you will be drinking tea with Lady Ashworth, who will mention that she heard a rumour, and you will say how extraordinary, and neither of you will mean a single syllable of the conversation. Margaret opens the door. Lady Ashworth is shown in. You are seated in your boudoir at 11:20, in a morning gown that is not quite a morning gown. Your husband is at his club until 3, in the house until 7, and at his mistress's house until midnight. This is a schedule you have not arranged and do not need to. Your footman announces a caller. The caller is a man who has called every Tuesday for 14 months. The door is shut. The household, professionally, does not notice. The boudoir, from the French, literally, sulking room. In theory, it's where you withdraw to be disagreeable. In practice, it's the only room in the house that is actually yours. The one room where a caller can be received without requiring your husband's presence, his permission, or his awareness that anyone has arrived at all. The door has a lock. You know where the key is. These are facts you have known since the first week of your marriage, when you understood, with some clarity, what kind of marriage it was going to be. The room itself does the work. A dozen beeswax candles on the mantelpiece give roughly the light of a single 40-watt bulb, which means the room is dim in a way that is socially useful. The coal fire is lit. The air carries hungry water, candle smoke, and the faint animal warmth of a fur-trimmed pelisse draped across the settee. Your caller sits not quite across from you, close enough to pass a folded note without standing, which is the relevant measurement. Thomas, the footman who announced him, has withdrawn to a position in the hallway that is technically nearby and functionally very far away. Thomas has been in your service for 6 years. Thomas has no opinions about Tuesdays. Thomas withdraws another 2 feet. Margaret passes the door without looking in. The townhouse was built with back staircases for servants, separate street entrances for tradesmen, and internal arrangements that allow a determined person to move through several rooms without being observed from the street or the main staircase. This was not designed for affairs. It was designed for households where 30 people lived and worked in proximity without anyone wanting to acknowledge that 30 people lived and worked in proximity. The plaster is thick, dim, and reliably absorbent. The affair just fits. The visit lasts 40 minutes. 40 minutes is correct. Less than 30 looks like a business call. More than an hour looks like something your husband's solicitor would later describe, in writing, using the phrase criminal conversation. Crim.con. Trials had pamphlets. The pamphlets had print runs. A servant at one such trial in 1798 described a particular perfume detected in a room where it had no business being, and the gallery laughed, and it sold 15,000 copies. You are aware of this literature. Everyone is aware of this literature. Margaret, your lady's maid, appears at the door at the precise moment that is correct. She does not knock loudly. She does not look at your caller directly. She adjusts a candlestick on the side table that did not need adjusting a candlestick that will always, on Tuesdays, require adjusting at exactly this moment, and announces that your carriage is wanted at 12:30. This is the signal. This is also technically true. The carriage is wanted at 12:30 because you booked it yesterday, because the signal needs to also be a fact. Your caller rises. He takes your hand. He does not linger over it. Lingering is for men who haven't been doing this for 14 months and don't understand what Thomas and Margaret cost in loyalty and how easily that cost tips the other direction. He is gone before noon. The door closes. You remain seated, in the morning gown that is not quite a morning gown, with the fire still lit and the room smelling of beeswax and coal smoke, and someone who was just here and is now, officially, nowhere. You are addressing an envelope to a woman who is not your correspondent. She is a friend. Inside that envelope is a second envelope, addressed in different ink, to a man. Your friend will receive the outer envelope at her own breakfast table, slip the inner envelope into the morning's outgoing pile, and never refer to the matter in writing, in conversation, or in her own correspondence with you. She does this for you. You do this for her. Mrs. Alderton receives the outer envelope at her own breakfast table at 9. She does not look at the inner envelope. She slides it onto her own outgoing pile while the butler is still removing the lid from the kidneys. There is no membership fee. There is no written agreement. The agreement is understood at a level considerably deeper than writing. The inner envelope. Not love poetry, or not only love poetry. Arrangements. Times. The name of a street you have reason to visit on Tuesday between 11 and 1. The cipher may be simple. A specific flower in the wax seal means yes. A different flower means delay. No seal at all means something has gone wrong and he should not come. You've worked this out in advance, in person, at a party where a dozen people were watching and nobody saw a thing because you were both looking at a painting of a horse. Mrs. Alderton, or whoever your particular forwarding friend is, handles her end with the professional neutrality of a woman who has been doing this since before you needed the favour. She receives. She forwards. She makes no inquiry. When you see her at Almack's on Wednesday, she will ask you whether you've tried the negus, and whether you think Lady Cowper looks tired. The negus will be warm. Lady Cowper will look fine. Neither of you will say anything else on the subject. This is the conversation. Both of you know this dance too well. The arrangement extends beyond post. A friend's carriage, waiting at a corner you didn't specify loudly, is a different address than your own carriage, which has a crest on the door that the whole street recognises. A friend's townhouse in Bruton Street offers a morning sitting room where two people may speak privately for 40 minutes while the friend is conveniently, consistently occupied upstairs. This is not unusual. Morning visits overlap all the time. The house is full of people. One more caller is just another name in the butler's book. Of course, this costs something. Not money or not usually money. What it costs is reciprocity, attention, and an absolute absence of written record. You know things about Mrs. Alderton that Mrs. Alderton's husband does not know. She knows things about you. Mrs. Alderton smiles across the negus at Almack's and asks whether the lemonade is warm enough. Your friend has a friend. That friend has a cousin. The cousin has a maid who carries notes to a florist whose boy delivers to addresses without recording them in any ledger the household keeps. By the time a letter reaches its destination, it has passed through 4 pairs of hands, none of whom will appear in a crimcon pamphlet without being spectacularly unlucky. The system isn't elegant. It's thorough. Elegant would be one straight line between two people. Thorough is what keeps you out of the ecclesiastical courts. Georgiana, Duchess of Devonshire, ran exactly this kind of chain through the years of her affair with Charles Grey. Her letters moved through a small army of female friends, ladies' maids, and household staff so practised at misdirection that her husband, a man with an entire estate full of servants whose loyalty he was paying for, still didn't have clean proof of the situation until it was considerably too late to matter. The letters weren't careless. They were routed. The route was patient, careful, and reliably indirect 3 layers of trusted women between the writing and the reading. Your friend seals your outer envelope with her own wax. Her crest, not yours. The letter, arriving at his address, looks like correspondence from a woman he knows socially. The footman who takes it in doesn't pause. It's a perfectly ordinary piece of post from a perfectly ordinary acquaintance. Inside, in different ink, in your hand, in whatever arrangement of words and signals you've agreed upon, is what you actually needed to say. The outer envelope is the alibi. The inner envelope is the letter. The friend who forwards your mail is both. You are paying a fee, in cash, to a tradesman in a street you would not normally walk down. In return, the tradesman accepts correspondence in a name that is not your name and holds it in a drawer until called for. The name is something flat and unremarkable, Mrs. Brown, Mrs. Smith chosen because it cannot be traced and will not be remembered. You will collect what arrives once a week. The tradesman will not look at you while you do so. The accommodation address is a step beyond the nested envelope system. It is for correspondence that cannot route through a friend, because the friend doesn't know, because the friend can't know, because some information is too inconvenient to share even with someone who already shares 3 other secrets with you. The tradesman is not a friend. He is a service. He charges a small quarterly fee, accepts a false name without comment, and stores letters in a locked wooden box he keeps beneath the counter next to what appears to be a ledger for boot repairs. It is almost certainly also a ledger for boot repairs. Nobody asks. The tradesman is not, to be clear, running this service out of civic goodwill. He runs it because women of means pay reliably, cause no trouble, and never haggle. He is small, precise, and reliably uninterested. He has 4 other women using variations of Mrs. Brown. He has lost track of which Mrs. Brown is which suits everyone. Mrs. Hartley, a glovemaker's widow on the same street, runs a parallel operation out of her front room and charges slightly less. Her letters smell faintly of lavender because she stores them near the window. This is occasionally a problem. The collection visit requires staging. You don't come in your own carriage, your coachman knows too many people, and a crest on a door is a fact. You come in a hackney, hired 3 streets over and dismissed 1 street short. You wear a walking dress rather than visiting dress, which signals nothing beyond an errand, and a bonnet with a brim deep enough that the woman across the road sees a bonnet, not a face. Your lady's maid, Agnes, waits at the corner. Agnes has been at the corner before. She has a look she performs, the look of a woman with nothing particular on her mind, that she has apparently been practicing since she was 17. The letters themselves, when you collect them, go directly into a flat pocket sewn into the lining of your pelisse, not your reticule, which can be lost, borrowed, or rifled by a curious housemaid with too much time and insufficient supervision. The pelisse pocket is Agnes's addition. She suggested it in the same tone she uses to suggest a different ribbon for a bonnet. Agnes has, over the course of 3 years, become quietly essential in the way that load-bearing walls are essential. You don't notice until you try to remove one. The accommodation fee is small, a few shillings per quarter, but it is cash, paid in person, which means it comes out of pin money, which means it doesn't exist on paper anywhere your husband would look. Pin money is the financial mechanism that makes all of this possible. It runs between £200 and £1,000 a year, depending on what your father's solicitor managed to extract from your husband's solicitor before the wedding, and it is yours to spend without account. Roughly £15,000 to £75,000 today. The marriage settlement assumed you would spend it on ribbons. You spend some of it on ribbons. The letter, when you finally open it at home, is written in the hand you recognise and contains a sentence that appears to be about the weather. It is not about the weather. You both know it is not about the weather. There is a second layer of meaning in the 3rd paragraph that references a visit to your cousin in Richmond, which is not your cousin and not Richmond. You have been doing this long enough that the decoding is automatic, the way Agnes's corner-waiting face is automatic. It takes about 45 seconds. You burn the letter, not dramatically, not with ceremony. You touch it to the candle, hold it over the grate, and it goes. A dozen beeswax candles produce about as much light as a single modern 40-watt bulb, which means the room is dim enough that the burning doesn't announce itself to anyone who happens to pass the door. The ash falls. The name Mrs. Brown, which was never your name, stops existing until next week. You are stepping out of a chair at the Pantheon on Oxford Street in a black domino, a hooded cloak that reaches the floor and a half mask that covers everything above the upper lip. Everyone inside is also in a domino. Everyone inside also knows everyone else inside, more or less, by gait and height and the trick of a wrist. The fiction is anonymity. The function is plausible deniability. The two are not the same. The Pantheon opened in 1772 as a winter equivalent of Vauxhall, a pleasure rotunda with a domed ceiling painted to suggest Rome, and an entrance fee that suggested exclusivity. By the time you're here, it's been rebuilt once after a fire, slightly tarnished, and absolutely packed. The man across the room has your husband's build. He doesn't. You know within 3 seconds. The domino is not a costume, It's a legal document. The domino says, "Whatever I do tonight, I wasn't here, and you didn't see it." It is long, dark, and reliably indistinguishable from the one beside it. The rule of the masquerade is that you don't unmask. No one enforces this. Everyone maintains it anyway, with the mutual seriousness of people who understand that the whole arrangement only works if everyone pretends it does. The domino is long enough to hide your shoes. This matters because your shoes are a well-known quantity in certain circles. A footman named Thomas, who serves at a house in Grosvenor Square you visit regularly, stands near the punch table holding a cup with both hands. He doesn't look at you. You don't look at him. He adjusts his grip on the cup in a way that is not how you hold a cup you intend to drink from. You drift left. He drifts left. This is not an accident. This is also not him. The room is warm in the way a room with 200 candles and 200 people gets warm animal and waxy and sweet, with a draught from the door that periodically sends everyone's cloaks sideways and reveals shoes. A woman near the column to your right has shoes you recognize. She either doesn't recognize yours or has decided not to. Both outcomes serve you equally well. Vauxhall Pleasure Gardens runs a similar operation across the river in Lambeth. Admission 2 shillings 6pence. Orchestra in the supper boxes. Lanterns strung in the trees, and features what contemporary guides describe, with great diplomatic care, as the dark walks. The dark walks are paths at the edge of the grounds where the lanterns thin out and eventually stop. The guides don't explain what happens on the dark walks. They don't need to. It was, in its way, a very practical use of landscaping. The Argyle Rooms on Regent Street offer a third option: subscription concerts that run late, dancing after, and rooms where the lighting is low enough that a pair of people can occupy a corner for 20 minutes without becoming a subject of public remark. You've been to the Argyle Rooms. You found the lighting adequate. Now, here is the specific genius of all of it. At a masquerade, you can speak to a person you're not supposed to know in front of 40 witnesses, and every one of those witnesses has an equal interest in not having seen it. The masquerade produces collective amnesia by design. It's not a party. It's a distributed agreement not to remember the party. Everyone who attends is buying the same service. Of course, someone always remembers. The Crim.con. Trial pamphlets sold in print shops near Fleet Street for a few pence, read by tens of thousands of people who had no personal stake in any of it, are full of servants describing what they saw through keyholes and across garden walls. A lady's maid at the 1798 Lady Worsley case testified about the smell of a particular perfume in a room where it had no business being. The perfume didn't wear a domino. The perfume didn't know the rules. You move through the room with the unhurried pace of someone who has nowhere specific to be, toward the place you have been specifically this entire time. You are paying 3 shillings and 6pence at the gate of the Vauxhall Pleasure Gardens, on the Surrey side of the river, on an evening in June. The supper boxes are lit. The orchestra is playing. Beyond the orchestra, beyond the lit walks, the gravel paths grow narrower and the lamps grow further apart, and the laughter from those paths is not the laughter of the supper boxes. You know which path you have been told to walk down. You walk down it. Vauxhall is not, technically, a place where anything illicit occurs. Vauxhall is a pleasure garden. There is an orchestra. There are supper boxes. There are lanterns strung through the elm trees, and the cold ham served in those supper boxes is famous, though not in a good way, sliced so thin you could read a bill of parliament through it, portioned by a man who works with the precision of someone who believes you are here for the music and not the food. The wine is adequate. The admission price of 3 shillings and 6pence is low enough to admit absolutely everyone, which is precisely the point. The dark walks are called the dark walks because they are dark. The elm trees close overhead. The gravel goes quiet under your feet, or at least quieter than the main promenade, and the lamps are spaced far enough apart that the pools of light have gaps between them. A man writing in 1798 described Vauxhall's shadowed paths as places where anything might happen. He meant this as a warning. His readers understood it as directions. Margaret, who works 2 seasons as a parlour-maid in Portman Square before her employment situation improves considerably, enters through the main gate on a Tuesday in 1809 with a group that includes her employer, her employer's cousin, and a gentleman whose name she will later decline to remember. She walks slightly behind. She is carrying a reticule that does not belong to her. When the group reaches the second lamp past the rotunda, it becomes 3 separate groups, briefly, and then reassembles as 2, and Margaret has learned not to count. Vauxhall isn't anonymous the way a masquerade is anonymous. You can't wear a domino cloak at Vauxhall. Not really, not without being one of the more theatrical people in the garden. The anonymity at Vauxhall is social rather than costumed. It works because everyone who is there has paid 3 shillings and sixpence, and has therefore agreed, implicitly, that they are simply out for the music. The music is very loud near the orchestra. This is useful. The elm trees have no opinions about what happens beneath them. The gravel records everything and reports nothing. The lamp at the turn of the dark walk has been burning in roughly the same position since the 1730s, and it has seen considerably more than the servants at a trial would later describe. It maintains a diplomatic silence. The lamp at Vauxhall is better at keeping secrets than most earls. The people inside the supper boxes can see the entrance to the dark walks from where they sit. They see who enters. They see, after a reasonable interval, who emerges. They apply themselves to their cold ham. The cold ham is very thin. There is nothing else to look at while you wait for people to emerge from the dark walks, and so the supper boxes become, accidentally, the best surveillance post in London, staffed entirely by people who are absolutely not watching anything. You emerge from the walk. Your companion is several steps behind you, because you are smart enough to walk out first and separately. Your dress is straight. Your hair is presentable. The orchestra is still playing. You locate your party near the second rotunda, accept a glass of rack punch, and remark that the elm trees are very fine this year. Someone agrees. The evening continues. 3 shillings and sixpence, well spent. You are working out a week's worth of timing on the back of an invitation. The house is in session until late on Mondays and Thursdays. White's takes him from 3 until 7 on most afternoons. Brooks's takes the rest. There is a standing dinner with his cousin on Wednesdays. Between these fixed points there are windows, of an hour, of an afternoon, of a whole night, when the house is yours and no one in it requires an explanation for who walks up the back stairs. The clubs are the structural fact on which everything else rests. White's has been in St. James's Street since 1693. Brooks's is directly across the road. Both require membership. Both require blackball-proof references. Both serve a dinner that takes a committed man somewhere between 3 and 4 hours to finish with the appropriate wines. Your husband is a committed man. He has never, in your recollection, left early. Mrs. Greville hands you the schedule she has copied out from the back of last week's invitation card. Tuesday at 4, Lord Belford is in his leather chair at White's. Thursday at 3, the same chair at Brooks's. Wednesday is dinner with his cousin. None of this is written in your household ledgers. Mrs. Greville has copied it onto a folded slip the size of a calling card, which she will tuck into the lining of the rosewood box before luncheon. Mrs. Greville, not her real name, which nobody uses anyway, has been with you since before your marriage. She is quiet, watchful, and structurally indispensable. She knows which letters go into the rosewood box and which go into the fire. She knows that Tuesday afternoons are not for receiving callers, and that the headache is a socially complete explanation requiring no further documentation. She hands you a sealed note without looking at the seal, which is the whole point of handing it to you without looking at the seal. She has opinions about exactly one of your correspondents, which she has never stated and which you have never asked about. The arrangement suits both of you considerably. Pin money, the contractual allowance written into your marriage settlement, runs to £400 a year in your case, roughly the cost of a reasonable horse, or approximately 400 shillings worth of things your husband doesn't track. The cash arrives every quarter in a sealed packet from the steward. Mrs. Greville counts it onto the writing desk and slides it into the rosewood box beside the schedule. Your boudoir from the French for sulking room, which the French apparently felt needed its own vocabulary, receives callers between 11 and 2. Your husband is not among them. Morning callers are, by convention, other women, clergymen with messages, and men who have been formally admitted to your acquaintance in ways your husband would theoretically recognize. Theoretically. The back stairs do not connect to the morning reception rooms. They connect to the floor above. Nobody planned it this way. It is simply how every townhouse in Mayfair and Belgravia ends up built, once the staff and the family stop sharing a single corridor. A footman named Prescott carries your reply. He walks it across 3 streets in the rain without reading it, which he cannot do anyway, and which is not the point. The point is that Prescott has a reliable sense of which doors he approaches from the front and which from the side. He has never been asked to explain the difference. He makes roughly £28 a year plus livery, and his discretion is worth considerably more than that to you. He knows this. You both proceed accordingly. The trials. The criminal conversation cases that end marriages publicly and sell as pamphlets at £1 a copy are built almost entirely on servant testimony. A lady's maid who noticed a particular scent of hungry water in a room where it had no business being. A footman who remembered the hour of an arrival. A coachman who drove a route he later couldn't quite recall the specifics of. These testimonies are the evidence because servants are the infrastructure. The pamphlets sell because everyone reading them has a household. Everyone reading them has, in some version of the same architecture, a back staircase. Somewhere on a Tuesday afternoon, a footman is being asked to remember an hour he was paid not to. You owe a great deal of money to people who are not your husband. The figure has grown over 4 years through faro, whist, and the cards turning the way the cards turn. You move money sideways, borrowing from a banker against your jewels, then from a second banker against the first loan, then from your closest friend against the second. Each month, the figure resets the conversation in your head from how to live to how to keep from being found out. The specific number, if you are Georgiana, Duchess of Devonshire, is somewhere north of £100,000. That is approximately £8 million today. The cards were not kind. The cards were never kind. And yet the game table at Devonshire House was set every night with the same cheerful inevitability as dinner. You don't have a salary. You don't have an account at Coutts in your own name. What you have is pin money, the contractual allowance written into your marriage settlement before the wedding, typically between £200 and £1,000 per year, which your husband legally couldn't audit even if he asked. You also have jewels, which function as portable collateral in a world where married women cannot sign contracts. The jewels go to the banker. You get the loan. The banker does not tell your husband, because your husband is a duke, and the banker would like to remain employed in England. A moneylender named Mr. Howard, a small, precise man who keeps his ledger open on the table, but never looks directly at the figure, extends you £300 against a rope of pearls your grandmother left you. He folds the note carefully in thirds. He hands it to your footman, not to you. The form matters. You are not here. You were never here. The pearls, however, are currently here, in his desk, and will remain here until the note is settled. Fletcher returns from the post and lays a third letter from a third banker on your writing desk without comment. She does not look at the seal. She does not look at you. Your solicitor, small, precise, professionally indifferent, opens a second ledger in the back office on Pall Mall, writes nothing in the first, and slides the second across to your side. Lady Bessborough hands you a folded note containing £600 in promissory paper and tells you not to thank her. You do not. 3 people now know the size of the figure. None of them will say it aloud. Mr. Howard does not visit Devonshire House. He waits, in his small, precise office off Bond Street, for the next folded note from your footman. Your closest friend, who has lent you £400 in 3 separate evenings, sits opposite you at breakfast and asks about the apricots. The apricots are good. The friend says so. The friend says nothing else. A conversation at White's would dismantle the fiction in an afternoon. Nobody has the conversation. Everyone proceeds to dinner. You write the letters yourself. The requests, the arrangements, the apologies to your creditors, the reassurances to your friend. You write them in a hand your husband would recognize if he found them, so you write quickly and burn the drafts. The beeswax candle does its part. The ashes settle in the grate. The figure in the ledger does not settle. It compounds. You have borne a daughter to a man who is not your husband. The child is healthy. You are not permitted to keep her. Your lover's parents will take her into their house in Northumberland. She will be raised under their name and told what she is told. The alternative is exile from London, from your husband, from your other children, from any version of the life you have spent 20 years building. The carriage that takes her north leaves at 6. You watch it go from a window upstairs. Georgiana's situation in 1792. The daughter is Eliza Courtenay. The father is Charles Grey, who will eventually become Prime Minister, which is the kind of detail that later historians underline, and the woman living it does not have the luxury of caring about. Grey's parents raise Eliza in Northumberland as part of their own household. Georgiana returns to Devonshire House. She is not discussed as someone who has lost a child. She is discussed as someone who has recovered her composure remarkably well. The law does very little with this situation, and that's not an oversight. Under coverture, the child Georgiana bore belongs to her husband by default, not to Grey, not to Georgiana herself, but to the Duke of Devonshire, who did not father it. The law has a tidy solution for situations it would prefer not to examine. It simply assigns ownership to the nearest husband and moves on. The child is, legally, a footnote in someone else's ledger. Northumberland is not nothing. It is a long way from London, from Devonshire House, from the Wednesday night assembly rooms at Almack's, from every morning caller and evening engagement that makes up a life inside the season. A carriage to Northumberland in 1792 takes days, not hours. Days. The road has opinions, the weather has opinions. The child will arrive in a house where nobody in London will ask about her, because asking about her would require acknowledging she exists, and acknowledging she exists would require acknowledging everything that preceded her. Henrietta Combe, Georgiana's lady's maid at the time, packs the infant's things. She doesn't speak while she does it. She is patient, careful, and reliably composed. She folds a small blanket with the focused attention of someone who has decided that being very precise about the folding is how she is managing this particular morning. The blanket is blue. Nobody notes the colour. Henrietta notes the colour. Georgiana stands at the upstairs window and watches the carriage. She is wearing a dark grey morning gown and a shawl Henrietta put across her shoulders an hour ago. She does not move. She has 3 older children still inside the house. The position at the centre of Whig society her mother negotiated for her at 17, and Devonshire House around her on every side, the walls, the rooms, the debts buried in the plaster. The carriage turns onto Piccadilly. Henrietta closes the door behind her without sound, and yet the record shows that Georgiana corresponded with Grey for the rest of her life. The letters are careful. They are routed through intermediaries. They do not say what they mean directly, because letters that say what they mean directly have a habit of ending up read aloud at crim.con. Trials to audiences of several thousand pamphlet buyers. She signs some of them in terms that sound like friendship. The letters sound like friendship the way a locked room sounds. Empty, technically accurate, profoundly unconvincing. Eliza Courtenay grows up in Northumberland. She knows something is unusual about her situation without being told what it is. She doesn't ask. The house, careful and complete, doesn't answer. The question stays 120 miles north of any room where it would have to be heard. You are at breakfast with your husband on one side of the table and the woman who is your closest friend, your husband's mistress, and the mother of his next 2 children on the other. The arrangement is the same every morning. The household refers to her as your guest. She has lived in this house for 9 years. The 3 of you have travelled together, raised children together, and corresponded as a unit with a number of European courts. London's view of this arrangement is unprintable. Your view of it is that it works. The woman across from you is Lady Elizabeth Foster, best to everyone who matters, daughter of the Earl of Bristol and possessed of an expression that suggests she has never once been surprised by anything. She arrived at Devonshire House in 1782 with very little money, a failed marriage, and children taken from her by a husband the courts found entirely adequate. She came for a visit. She stayed for the rest of your life. The marmalade is where she likes it. The practical cost of running this arrangement is its own kind of accounting, not the emotional one that one is too long for a single morning, the practical one. Devonshire House on Piccadilly requires a staff of dozens. The Duke manages the bills through his steward. You manage your household through your housekeeper, your lady's maid, and a chain of loyalties that runs from the front door to the back garden and is maintained through discretion, and a complete institutional amnesia about which bedroom doors were shut on which nights. The house is large enough that it simply contains the situation. Large houses in this era function the same way very expensive lawyers do. They make inconvenient facts physically elsewhere. Meanwhile, the children are sorted out downstairs with nurses and tutors who understand that the house contains several categories of child, and that no child has ever benefited from having the categories explained to them. Your legitimate children by the Duke, 4 who survived. Bess's children by the Duke, 2, eventually. Your daughter by Charles Grey, already gone to Northumberland, 2 years now, and you do not look in that direction. The nursery wing runs on a kind of cheerful professional neutrality, which is basically the Downton Abbey below stairs code of silence, except this is real and there are no cameras. Nobody at this table is pretending. London has known since approximately 1784. The caricaturists have opinions. James Gilray has, on at least one occasion, committed the arrangement to print. Society whispers and then invites all 3 of you to dinner anyway, because the Duke is the Duke, you are the Duchess, and Bess can work a room with the easy warmth of someone who has absolutely nothing to prove and knows it. The scandal is the wallpaper. You have stopped seeing it. Bess has her own suite. She corresponds with her own friends, manages her own small finances through gifts the Duke makes in ways that require no paperwork, and receives her own morning callers when you receive yours. There are mornings when 3 separate drawing rooms in Devonshire House are occupied simultaneously, each containing a woman being visited, each conversation moving at its own temperature. A footman named Thomas, wide, steady, constitutionally unimpressed, carries notes between floors without varying his expression by a single degree. Thomas has worked here for 11 years. Thomas has seen everything. Thomas will take everything he has seen directly to his grave, where it belongs. Your correspondence with Grey continues, in terms careful enough to survive a reading by anyone. You do not write his name. He does not write yours. The letters arrive through Henrietta Combe and leave the same way, to folded inside household accounts that nobody in the Duke's stewardship thinks to open, because a household of this scale produces paper the way a river produces water, constantly and with no particular agenda. The grief over Eliza sits somewhere below the level of your daily operation. Bess passes the marmalade. You take it. You are wearing a livery coat that does not belong to you, white stockings, breeches, and a powdered wig too large for your head. Your own hair is pinned flat beneath it. You have entered the building from the street, walked past the porter, and presented a note to a manservant on the first-floor landing. The note asks for a private audience. The handwriting is your own. The manservant looks at you for a second longer than necessary. He does not say anything. He shows you in. The page boy is Lady Caroline Lamb. The year is 1812. The building is the Albany in Piccadilly, where Lord Byron has recently taken chambers, and Caroline has arrived dressed as a page boy because the front door has a porter, and she has already been recognised twice this week. The costume is not especially convincing. It is, however, better than nothing. She is the wife of William Lamb, soon to be Viscount Melbourne, soon to be Prime Minister, and she has no pressing engagements until 3 o'clock. The wig is borrowed from her dressing room. It fits badly. She doesn't care. The letters precede the wig. Before the page boy visit, before the scene at the porter's desk, Caroline has sent Byron somewhere in the range of several hundred letters. Some are endearing, some are threatening, some arrive on the same day. One of them contains a lock of her pubic hair, enclosed with a note explaining what it is, in case there was any ambiguity. Byron, for his part, describes her in correspondence to a friend as the cleverest, most agreeable, absurd, amiable, perplexing, dangerous, fascinating little being that lives. He means this as a warning to himself. It does not work. The affair lasts several months. Caroline will later describe Byron in her journal as mad, bad, and dangerous to know, which is the most famous phrase to emerge from a relationship that also produced the lock of hair situation. Society is watching all of this with the focused attention of people who have very little else to do between 11 and 4. Morning calls are exchanged, notes are compared, eyebrows are raised and then carefully lowered, because everyone in this social circle has their own version of the page boy story, even if the costume is different. A footman at Holland House carries a sealed envelope through 3 intermediate households before it reaches its destination. A lady's maid presses a handwritten address from memory and doesn't write it down. These are the logistics. They function the way a very committed group chat functions now, except slower and with more wax seals. William Lamb is aware of the affair. Most of London is aware of the affair. The affair is, in the technical sense, a secret, which means it is known to everyone and documented by no one. This is the correct definition of a Regency secret. Caroline later turns it into a novel, Glenarvon, published in 1816, anonymously, thinly veiled, with Byron as the villain and her husband as a man of quiet dignity who deserved better. Everyone in society reads it immediately. Everyone pretends not to know who wrote it. The author's name appears nowhere on the cover. Her face appears on approximately no disguise that has ever worked. A manservant named Fletcher, Byron's own valet, a man of extraordinary discretion and considerable long-suffering, handles most of the traffic. Fletcher is steady, careful, and reliably unreadable. He opens the doors. He receives the notes. He carries messages back down the stairs with the practiced neutrality of a man who has seen a great deal and intends to continue seeing it without comment. He holds the door, he closes it, he does not mention the wig. The affair ends badly, as affairs conducted at this velocity tend to do. Caroline makes a scene at a ball. The specific ball varies by account, but the scene does not, and Byron begins declining her letters. She sends more. He declines those too. The page boy gambit is, in retrospect, the high point of the campaign. It worked once. It will not work again. Fletcher has been given instructions. You are writing a novel about your husband and your former lover, and you intend to publish it. The names will be changed. The houses will be lightly disguised. The dialogue, particularly the dialogue between the heroine and the poet, will be lifted from your own letters with the spelling adjusted. The publisher will issue it anonymously. By the second week of sales, every drawing room in London will know who wrote it. This is not a side effect. This is the point. The novel is Glenarvon. The year is 1816. You are Lady Caroline Lamb, wife of William Lamb, future Viscount Melbourne, future Prime Minister, current man who has not yet fully grasped what is about to happen to him. The poet in the book is Lord Glenarvon, who bears a striking resemblance to Lord Byron in terms of his face, his manner, his speeches, and the precise shape of his romantic devastation. Byron, upon reading it, reportedly says it is bad. He does not say it is inaccurate. Anonymous authorship in 1816 functions less like anonymity and more like a surprise party where everyone has already been told. You submit the manuscript under no name. The publisher prints, by the author of and, leaves the blank blank. This is a known signal. The blank means someone is watching their reputation carefully while also burning it to the ground in approximately 350 pages. Missus. Harriette, your lady's maid, has recopied the final draft in a different hand at your request because you read somewhere that handwriting could be recognized. It cannot save you. Nothing can save you. You knew this when you started chapter 1. What's remarkable about Glenarvon is not that Caroline published it, it's the specificity. Devonshire House appears thinly renamed. The conversations reconstruct real arguments from real rooms. One character is unmistakably Lady Holland, rendered with the warmth of a woman who has been studied closely and found wanting. Lady Holland will not speak to Caroline again for some years after publication. This is a price Caroline has calculated and paid in advance, the way you might tip a doorman on your way out of a building you're never returning to. Meanwhile, in the clubs and drawing rooms of Mayfair, the attribution exercise takes roughly 48 hours. A bookseller on Bond Street, a Mr. Ridgway, shifts the copies faster than anticipated. Men buy it to check whether they appear in it. Women buy it to check whether their husbands appear in it. 1 or 2 people buy it because they actually want to read the novel. The market does not distinguish between these motivations. The market simply runs low on stock by Thursday. William Lamb reads it. William Lamb is the husband. The husband is in the book. The husband in the book is not presented as a villain. which is almost worse. He's presented as a man married to a woman too vivid for his particular life, which is the kind of assessment that follows a man quietly into every subsequent social engagement for the next several years. He does not, to his credit, have Caroline committed or divorced. He separates from her eventually, in 1825, 9 years after Glenarvan appears. The book simply sits between them on the shelf until then. It has opinions about its own presence there, strong ones. The novel isn't actually good in the way that novels are evaluated when posterity gets involved. It is overwrought, operatic, and reliably indignant. The villain is irresistible in ways that make you wonder whose side the author is on. But Glenarvan isn't trying to win a prize. It's trying to say something to a specific man in London who will definitely read it, in a society where a married woman under coverture can't write him a letter, can't take him to court, can't own the rooms she suffered in, can't legally claim a single piece of her own correspondence. What she can do is publish a novel, anonymously, and then stand in a drawing room at a party and watch the room figure it out in real time. A footman in white gloves sets down a fresh tea tray on the side table near the window. He doesn't meet your eye. He has seen the reviews. The reviews are everywhere. You are in a small shop 2 streets from the market, asking, in a low voice, for what the printed handbill in the window calls a machine. The shopman produces a small object made of sheep intestine and tied at the open end with a length of pink ribbon. The cost is 1 shilling. The transaction takes less than a minute. The object goes into your reticule wrapped in plain paper. You leave the shop by a different door than the one you entered through. The purchase itself is not technically a secret, not in the way that the shop's location is a secret, or the address you're walking to next is a secret. Sheep intestine condoms have been sold near Covent Garden since the previous century. The handbills are in the window. The transaction is brief and professional, almost brisk. The shopman does not meet your eye, which is a courtesy extended in both directions. The word used in polite company, when it's used at all, is French letter, the French being blamed for most things that needed blaming. The word used in less polite company is machine, which manages to be both clinical and vague enough that it could theoretically refer to several different objects. 1 shilling buys you the sheep intestine, the ribbon, and the studied forgetfulness of the shopman. The plain paper wrapping is included at no additional charge. The shopman folds the wrapper twice and slides it across the counter without looking up. Now, here is the problem. The condom is associated loudly, socially, irreversibly with prostitution. Between people of equal social standing, in a private arrangement of the kind you're involved in, it carries the wrong implication. It suggests planning. It suggests a certain category of transaction. A man who produces one in a drawing room upstairs is telling a story about himself that he'd rather not tell. A woman who produces one is telling a different story, and that story has considerably worse consequences. The object is practical. The object is also, in this particular social register, almost unfeasible to use. It sits in your reticule doing nothing, like a very small, very disappointing umbrella. A different method exists, almost. Francis Place will write it all down in 1,822 inches, a pamphlet called To the Married of Both Sexes, for which he will receive an absolutely spectacular amount of disapproval. The method is a sponge, soaked in vinegar or lemon juice, used internally. It is small, sour, and reliably uncomfortable. It requires preparation, which requires knowledge, which requires someone to have told you a lady's maid, an older woman, a pamphlet you obtained the same way you obtained everything else you weren't supposed to have. The information moves through the same informal network as the cipher letters and the morning call arrangements. Someone knew. Someone told someone. The chain of whispered knowledge runs back further than anyone writes down. Mrs. Phelps her actual name. She runs the linen closet and has done since before your wedding, hands you a small glass jar one afternoon without explanation and without looking up from the inventory she is counting. The jar smells of vinegar. She returns to her counting. You take the jar. Neither of you has said anything that could be repeated. The reliable options, if you're counting, are the sponge, the French letter you cannot plausibly use, calendar guessing, and hope. Hope is the most widely deployed. Hope has a poor record. The absence of anything better is not discussed in Parliament, in drawing rooms, or in the pages of La Belle Assemblée, the fashion periodical that covers everything a woman of your class needs to know about the current silhouette and nothing whatsoever about this. The gap between what the periodical covers and what your actual life requires is, at this point in history, considerable. You walk back towards street. James's with the wrapped package in your reticule and the jar from Mrs. Phelps already at home in the back of the dressing table drawer, behind a box of hairpins. The shilling is gone. The afternoon is still yours. The object is useful, even if its usefulness requires a social context it doesn't quite fit into, and a confidence that the situation will not require explanation, and a door with a reliable latch, and a coachman who has learned to wait without watching. You have all of these things. You've been managing all of these things for months. The shilling is the easy part. You are folding a small natural sponge, soaked in a solution of vinegar and water, into a clean square of linen at the back of your dressing table drawer. The book by Mr. Place, which describes the practice, was lent to you by a married friend and returned without comment. The drawer also contains a hairbrush, a tortoiseshell comb, and a glove that is missing its pair. The sponge is the only item in the drawer you have never mentioned aloud to anyone, including the friend who lent you the book. The drawer smells faintly of vinegar and beeswax. The linen square sits 2 inches behind the hairpins, folded flat. What you actually know, the sponge works imperfectly. You know this because the friend who lent you the book did not elaborate, but she has 3 children in 5 years and a 4th on the way, which is elaboration enough. Mr. Place's pamphlet, addressed decorously to the married of both sexes, describes the method in language so neutral it reads like directions for a compress. Lemon juice is the alternative to vinegar. The pamphlet does not specify which is preferable. You have used vinegar because vinegar was in the kitchen and you didn't want to explain the lemons. Your lady's maid, Harriette, the one who has carried 3 separate notes to 3 separate addresses this season, and forgotten all of them on command, refills the small ceramic vinegar bottle on your dressing table without being asked. She has done this for 8 months. She has never once looked at the bottle when she sets it down. That is the whole of the conversation, and it is complete. The broader situation has no official vocabulary at all. You can't consult a physician, because the physician is your husband's physician. You can't purchase anything from an apothecary under your own name, because under coverture your name legally belongs to someone who is currently in Parliament debating the Corn Laws. The Corn Laws, meanwhile, are not your problem. The drawer is your problem. You manage accordingly. The other thing you know, from the same informal network that produced the book and the bottle and the silence, is that none of this is reliable enough to trust completely. A dizzy spell in February, a missed count in March, a quiet week of waiting that you fill by embroidering a fire screen with considerably more intensity than the fire screen requires. The sponge is a precaution. Precautions are not guarantees. Every woman in your acquaintance with a private arrangement understands this, though no one has said it in those terms, because no one has said it at all. There is a small leather diary in the same drawer as the linen square. The first week of each month is marked with a dot in the corner of the page, in pencil, faint enough to rub away with a thumb. The friend who lent you the Place pamphlet returned it with a single dog-eared corner on the page about timing, and nothing else said. You write nothing down beyond the dot. You learn the rest from her dog ear and from your own counting. Harriette is quiet, careful, and reliably unobservant. She straightens the items on your dressing table, the hairbrush, the comb, the single glove, the vinegar bottle with the focused neutrality of someone arranging objects she has never seen before and will never see again. She tucks the linen square flat against the back of the drawer and pushes it closed with one finger. The drawer doesn't stick. It closes smoothly, the way well-maintained things do when they are tended by people who understand what they're tending. You are draped in a Greek shawl in a room of guests who have travelled from across Europe to see this. You take up the first pose Niobe and hold it while a chord on the pianoforte concludes. Then Medea. Then Iphigenia. Then, after the changes, Cleopatra. Each pose lasts about 30 seconds. Each is held in absolute stillness. The guests applaud between figures, quietly, the way one applauds in a chapel. Your husband stands at the back of the room. Your lover stands beside him. Both of them are watching. The woman holding the shawl is Emma Hamilton. Born Amy Lyon in Cheshire, daughter of a blacksmith, she arrived in Naples in the late 1780s as the companion of a British diplomat named Sir William Hamilton, who was 36 years older, a collector of antiquities, and genuinely delighted with her in the specific way that a man who loves beautiful objects is delighted by a beautiful object. She married him in 1791. She became famous across Europe not primarily for the marriage, but for the attitudes. The attitudes were a performance art, though nobody called it that, because the concept didn't exist yet. Emma would stand before guests wearing a plain white gown and a long shawl, and she would move through a sequence of classical poses drawn from Greek mythology and ancient sculpture. She had studied Sir William's collection carefully. She knew how Niobe held her arms when she grieved. She knew the angle of Medea's chin. She could shift, in 30 seconds, between 6 or 8 completely different figures, each one held with the stillness of marble, each one recognizable to any educated European guest as something they had seen in a museum. It was scholarship, performance, and physical grace delivered simultaneously in the body of one woman. Goethe saw it. Goethe wrote about it at length. When Goethe writes about something at length, that is the 18th century equivalent of a viral moment. Admiral Horatio Nelson arrived in Naples in 1798, shortly after the Battle of the Nile. He was wounded, exhausted, and famous. Emma nursed him. Sir William watched and apparently concluded that the situation was fine, which is either the most open-minded position in marital history or a man deeply committed to not making scenes. Nelson moved in. The three of them travelled together, lived together, and corresponded together. Their daughter Horatio was born in 1801. The official explanation was that Horatio was a child given to them in trust by whom, for what reason, the story did not specify. Nobody pressed too hard. The story was doing its best under the circumstances. A footman named Thomas carried correspondence between Emma and Nelson during the years when the fleet kept Nelson elsewhere. Thomas did this for a decade. Thomas knew everything. Thomas said nothing, because Thomas was employed by a household where everyone's continued comfort depended on Thomas saying nothing, and Thomas understood his position perfectly. Sir William Hamilton received visitors in the formal rooms. Emma managed the household, hosted the dinners, performed the attitudes for travelling grandees, and ensured that Nelson, when present, was comfortable and fed and socially placed. Nelson adored her with a directness that is almost painful to read, writing letters that describe Emma in terms that suggest he could not quite believe she existed. Sir William died in 1803. He left Emma a modest annuity, and Nelson a note expressing affection for them both. The note exists. It is in a museum now, behind glass, radiating a remarkable cheerfulness, given what it is. Emma outlived both of them on progressively less money, died in Calais in 1,815 inches debt, and was buried in a foreign churchyard. Nelson had asked the nation to provide for her. The nation declined. The attitudes, it turned out, were not a pension plan. They were extraordinary while they lasted, and they lasted long enough that European painters made careers from depicting them, which is something. In the long gallery, the shawl settles. Your husband applauds. Your lover applauds beside him. The pianoforte player turns the page. You find the next pose. The room is warm from bodies and candles. Nobody says anything that matters. But they are all watching, and you are the one they came to see, and for the length of each held figure, you are perfectly still and perfectly visible and entirely, deliberately, yourself. You are at the head of the table, with your husband on your right and the Admiral on your left, and the conversation among the three of you is by now so practiced that the footmen have stopped pretending not to listen. Your husband corresponds with the Admiral about diplomatic matters. You correspond with the Admiral about everything else. The Admiral corresponds with both of you, separately, in 2 different handwritings. The household is run as a unit of 3. Naples, for the time being, has accepted this. Sir William Hamilton's position at this table is the load-bearing one. He is 73. He is a diplomat, a classicist, and a collector of antiquities so devoted that when Vesuvius erupted he reportedly took notes. He has been watching you perform your attitudes for visiting dignitaries for 15 years. He knows what you are. He is also the British envoy to Naples, and Nelson is the man who won the Battle of the Nile, and the three of you together represent something that looks remarkably like a successful foreign policy operation. Sir William Hamilton has assessed the situation with the eye of a man who has catalogued 3,000 Greek vases, and he has decided it is fine. The arrangement has a name, technically. Contemporaries called it a ménage à trois when they were feeling French about it, and an irregular connection when they were feeling English. Neither phrase captures the organisational efficiency of the thing. There is a butler named Francesco who knows which letters go to which desk. There is a routine. Breakfast is together. Afternoons belong to whoever needs them. Dinner is collective and goes late, because the food in Naples is very good and all three of you have opinions about it. Meanwhile, back in London, people are discussing you. The newspapers have already printed several things about the Admiral's particular regard for Lady Hamilton, and particular regard in 1800 is doing a great deal of work as a phrase. Horatia exists. She is described, in the documentation, as a child given to you both in trust by a woman who cannot care for her. This woman does not exist. Nobody presses the point. The fiction is maintained with the same collective effort that keeps any household running, distributed, unspoken, and renewed daily by everyone who finds it useful. Sir William dies in 1803, in London, with Nelson on one side of the bed and you on the other, which he apparently requested. He leaves Nelson a portrait of you and describes you in his will as an angel who has made his life perfectly happy. Nelson leaves nothing to chance and writes to the British government on his deathbed at Trafalgar, formally requesting that it provide for you and Horatia as his legacy to my king and country. The government declines, politely, in writing. The letter survives. A footman named Gaetano, who has carried messages between your rooms in Naples for 4 years without once being asked to explain himself, understands the situation better than the Foreign Office does. Gaetano tips things, very slightly, toward whoever needs them. It is the most important skill in the household. Gaetano refills the wine on the Admiral's side. Sir William raises his glass to the room and tells a story about a vase. Nelson laughs. Slightly too long. You catch Gaetano's eye for half a second. He looks back at the carafe and pours a thumb's width more. The shawl held up better than the marriage settlement did. Naples accepts the triangle. London accepts the triangle, quietly, at one remove. The Royal Navy names a ship after Nelson, and a street after Nelson, and a square after Nelson, and does not name anything after you. The pension request sits in a drawer at the Foreign Office, which has opinions about obligation, and has apparently decided to keep them private. Horatia lives to 81. She never publicly acknowledges who her mother was. When asked about Emma, she changes the subject to her father. You are at the bottom of the garden of a small house in Llangollen, in a country you chose because no one in your family lives in it. The woman you ran away from Ireland with stands at the door. Together you keep accounts, plant the kitchen garden, receive Wordsworth on Thursdays, and write very long letters explaining to relations why you will not be coming home. The neighbours call you the ladies. The newspapers call you romantic friends. You have not yet decided which version to correct. The escape itself is the place to start. It is 1778. Eleanor Butler is 39. Sarah Ponsonby is 23. They have made 2 attempts, the first discovered and returned, like escaped parcels addressed to the wrong century, and on the second try they make it to Wales with a small dog, a little money, and no plan beyond not going back. Their families are appalled. Their families are also, eventually, exhausted. That is the thing about determination worn at a low, steady frequency. It outlasts outrage every time. Plus Newid is the house. Not a grand name for a grand house, it's a modest slate-roofed cottage in the Dee Valley that they spend the next 50 years improving with an intensity that borders on architecture as argument. They add Gothic carvings. They add a library. They add stained glass. The garden accumulates opinion. A visitor arriving at Place Newid in 1795 would find a house that had decided exactly what it was, which is more than most London townhouses could say. The guests are not modest. Wordsworth comes. Walter Scott comes. Wellington comes, which is either a social call or a reconnaissance exercise. And with Wellington, it is always hard to say which. Edmund Burke comes. They receive these men in a house they own, in a life they designed, in a valley that had the good sense to leave them alone. There's a particular kind of power in being visited by the most important people in Britain, while technically living outside the social system those people run. The newspapers have thoughts. Romantic friendship is the phrase that gets deployed with the warm, careful weight of a term chosen to foreclose further questions. Female pairs living together, travelling together, building a life together, this was classifiable as intense female companionship, which the era found moving rather than threatening, provided nobody looked too closely at the sleeping arrangements. The ladies of Llangollen are not hiding. They are categorised. There's a difference, and it functions in their favour. A visitor named Mrs. Goddard arrives one Tuesday with a letter of introduction and is received in the parlour by Eleanor, who sits very straight and has a habit of finishing her own sentences just before you expect her to. Sarah brings tea. The dog, who is not named in the visitor accounts because the dog has already figured out you're not important, settles under the table. Mrs. Goddard will later write home about the remarkable domestic harmony of the establishment and the excellent cake, and she will mean both things completely without irony. Their correspondence with their families never really stops. It just changes register from argument to update, from justification to report. They are alive. They are well. They are not coming home. The letters are very long. People in situations like this always write very long letters, because the alternative is silence, and silence means the other person gets to imagine the ending. The money is tight and occasionally tighter. A royal pension is eventually granted George III, who has his own ideas about domestic arrangement, approves £100 a year, which helps. Their accounts show the usual entries: kitchen supplies, postage, books, garden seeds, and the coal required to heat a Welsh Valley house in November, which turns out to be a very large amount of coal. They manage. They are efficient. Margaret the maid is small, capable, and reliably present. She stays with them for decades, carrying the household with the quiet institutional competence of someone who has been in the same building long enough to become part of its structure. For 53 years they do not leave. Llangollen keeps them. The world comes to Llangollen, signs the guest book, admires the garden, eats the cake, and goes back to London. Eleanor dies in 1829. Sarah follows 2 years later. They are buried together in the churchyard of St. Colin's Bay. The grave is still there. The neighbours still call them the ladies. You are at your desk in a room that locks from the inside, writing the day's events in plain English. The rents collected, the calls paid, the weather, the cat. Then, on the bottom third of the page, you switch to a cipher made of Greek letters, mathematical symbols, and punctuation marks, and you write what actually happened. The cipher is your invention. No one else knows the key. You will write 4 million words in this diary before you die, and 1/6 of them will be in this cipher. You are Anne Lister of Shibden Hall, born 1791. You are not hiding from strangers. You are hiding from everyone you know. Halifax knows you as Gentleman Jack. The name arrived on its own, attached itself, and stayed. You wear dark coats. You manage your own estates. You negotiate directly with coal surveyors and tenant farmers without apology, which in the 1810s reads as approximately the behaviour of a man who has simply forgotten to be a man. You do not forget. The diary predates almost everything. You started it young and you have not stopped. The plain English portion handles the parts of your life that can be handled in plain English. Church attendance, household accounts, a letter from your aunt, rain. The cipher portion handles Mariana Belcombe, Isabella Norcliffe, and later Anne Walker, in the kind of specific anatomical detail that the 19th century did not have a vocabulary for that wasn't criminal. So you make your own vocabulary. It is 16% of 4 million words. You don't call it a code, you call it crypthand. It sits on the page like a string of mathematical doodles, completely legible to no one alive until a 20th century scholar spends years working it out, looks up from the desk, and has to sit quietly for a moment. What the cipher protects is not your reputation in the abstract, it is your actual life. The ladies of Llangollen have the cover of romantic friendship, that useful social category that allows two women to share a house and a bed and receive respectable visitors and be classified as eccentric rather than criminal. You don't fully have that cover. Your manner is too direct. The neighbours talk. A woman in Hastings once broke off her correspondence with you because someone warned her about your character. The warning was accurate. The correspondence ended. You recorded the event in crypthand and moved on. You do not record your feelings in the plain English sections. The feelings live entirely in cipher. A dinner party appears in both halves of the same page. The upstairs version lists who attended and what was served, and the downstairs version notes what happened in the carriage afterward, with the woman seated next to you. The carriage is mentioned in plain English only as the conveyance home. The carriage, in crypthand, is considerably more eventful. The man who eventually decodes the diary will be John Lister, a descendant who inherits Shibden Hall in the 1890s. He reads the decoded diary and, on the advice of a friend, does not publish it. He donates the hall and everything in it to Halifax. The diary sits in the archive for decades, officially described as of historical interest. It is, in fact, the most detailed first-person account of a woman's same-sex relationship surviving from the period. It simply needs another century before anyone can say that in a sentence without lowering their voice. Anne Walker, whom you eventually marry in a private ceremony at Holy Trinity Church in Goodramgate in 1834, taking communion together as the closest available equivalent to vows, is described in plain English as a companion and in crypthand as a wife. The distinction is small, archival, and reliably load-bearing. You hold both versions simultaneously your entire adult life, the one the world sees and the one you write in a script the world cannot read. It is an enormous amount of administrative work. You do it without complaint, in neat handwriting, every single day. You are reading a letter, in a hand you do not recognize, from a woman you have never met, who has met your husband on numerous occasions. The letter mentions that she is writing her memoirs. The letter mentions the publisher she is in conversation with. The letter mentions, very politely, that for £200 she can be persuaded to omit a certain chapter. The chapter is named. Your husband, the letter assures you, has already received his own copy of the same letter, with a different chapter named. The woman's name is Harriette Wilson. She is 38 years old, she lives in Paris, and she has, by her own count, conducted affairs with a significant portion of the peerage. The Duke of Wellington, Lord Ponsonby, the Marquess of Worcester. These are not allegations. These are chapter headings. The book is called Memoirs of Herself and Others, and it arrives in 1,825 inches, 9 separate instalments, the way a very sophisticated threat always arrives in instalments. Harriette Wilson's offer is technically very simple. £200, roughly £15,000 in today's money, and your husband's name gets omitted. It's a Substack with a paywall, except the paywall is being mentioned by name, the publication date is already set, and the printer is in Covent Garden. The Duke of Wellington received his letter and reportedly sent back 3 words, publish and be damned. Whether he actually wrote that is disputed. The sentence, however, is completely correct. Most men paid, some men did not. The memoirs came out either way, and the print run sold immediately, and the pamphlet sellers outside St. James's moved copies faster than they could stack them. A footman named Thomas, who works 3 houses down from you and owes no loyalty to your household whatsoever, buys one on his afternoon off and brings it back inside his coat. What you are holding in your hand is not, strictly speaking, a blackmail letter. It is addressed to you, personally, which means Harriette Wilson knows your name, knows your husband's name, and knows at least one thing about your marriage that she has decided is worth pricing at £200. The letter does not threaten you. It offers you an opportunity. This distinction matters a great deal to Harriette Wilson and essentially no one else. £200 is, depending on the terms of your marriage settlement, somewhere between a fifth and the whole of your annual pin money. It is the cash you use for private correspondence, for the carriage when you do not want the trip recorded, for your lady's maid's discretion and your modiste silence. £200 is the exact amount of money that technically exists, that your husband cannot legally touch, and that you absolutely cannot explain withdrawing all at once without a conversation you are not prepared to have. Your lady's maid, whose name is Price, reads the letter over your shoulder because you forgot to tell her not to. She does not say anything. Price is small, exact, and reliably composed. She takes the letter, folds it exactly as it arrived, and sets it on the writing desk with the sealed face down. Then she goes to find your stationery. You are reading a piece of paper that informs you that your husband is suing another man for criminal conversation, and that you will be named in the proceedings. The case will be tried in open court. The transcripts will be sold in pamphlet form within 3 weeks. Your maiden name and your married name will both appear on the first page, in a font slightly larger than the rest. The damages sought are £2,000. The amount is £2,000 because that number sounds well in print. Criminal conversation is the legal term. Crim.con is the social term. What it actually is, a tort action, husband to lover, in which your body is the property damaged and the trial is a public accounting of how the damage was done. You are not a party to the case. You cannot testify on your own behalf. You cannot retain counsel. You are the subject of the proceedings, the way a disputed painting is the subject of an auction present, appraised and not consulted. The transcripts are the part that should concern you most. A barrister stands up and reads from a list. The list includes dates, addresses, times of day, and the testimony of servants. Your lady's maid, who you paid £8 per year and trusted with 11 years of private correspondence, is on the list. She will describe, under oath, a specific afternoon in October, the arrangement of the furniture, a pair of gloves left on a chair that had no business being there, and a smell. The smell is Hungary water, your Hungary water. The prosecution knows the brand because your maid purchased it, on your account, from a particular shop on New Bond Street, and the shop has records. A footman called James, not your James, the other household's James, will testify that he carried a note, folded, sealed, and addressed in a handwriting he recognizes because he carried 17 previous notes in the same hand. He kept count. Nobody asked him to keep count. He kept count anyway, which is the thing about footmen that nobody accounts for when planning an affair. They have a great deal of time, very little to occupy their minds, and an extraordinary memory for detail that becomes professionally relevant approximately once per career. The pamphlet runs to 46 pages, on average. The opening section establishes the marriage, the settlement, and the character of the plaintiff. The middle section contains the servant testimony, printed verbatim, including the smell of the Hungary water and the count of 17 notes. The closing section gives the verdict and the damages. The pamphlet sells for £1 at coffee houses, bookshops, and several establishments near Covent Garden that also sell French letters for £1, which is one of those coincidences that says something about what the market is, though nobody says it aloud. The 1798 Lady Worsley case produced a pamphlet read by tens of thousands. The Gray and Ligonier case of 1771 went into multiple printings. Your case, if it has the right combination of names, a good Hungary water detail, and the count of 17 notes, will do similarly well. Lord Elborough, your husband's barrister, is aware of this. He structures his arguments for the reading public first and the court second. The jury, 12 men of property, have likely already read the pamphlet from the last Crim Con trial and have opinions about the going rate for damages. The damages, when they come, will be paid by the man your husband is suing. Not by you. You have no money. This is coverture. The money flows between men, through a court, because of your body, and lands somewhere you will never see. The £2,000 will probably become £300 on appeal, then settle quietly. The man will pay it. Your husband will receive it. The barrister will take a portion. The pamphlet printer will do very well. You will not be present at any of this. You're at your mother's house in Bath by then, which everyone understands to mean something specific, and nobody says what. You are sitting behind a screen at a courtroom in Westminster while a barrister in a wig asks your former chambermaid to describe a bedsheet. She describes the bedsheet. She is asked about a particular afternoon last September, between the hours of 2 and 4. She remembers it. She is asked what she smelled on the landing outside the closed door. She remembers that too. The screen does not muffle her voice. The screen does not muffle anyone's voice. The screen exists only so that the public gallery cannot see your face. The chambermaid's name is Mary. You have known Mary for 6 years. You gave Mary her position. You gave Mary a Christmas box every year, which she accepted with the particular expression of a person who is filing everything away. You did not know, at the time, that the filing was quite this thorough. Mary has a memory like a very organised ledger, and the barrister has found the right page. Servant testimony covers everything. The footman who carried the note can describe the note. Not the contents he can't read, but the size, the seal, the frequency, and the expression on your face when you handed it to him. The lady's maid who helped you dress for the afternoon can describe which gown you chose, and why that particular gown was unusual for a Tuesday. The coachman who drove you to an address in Marylebone can describe the address, the duration of the visit, and whether you asked him, specifically, not to mention it to anyone. He can confirm that you did ask. He can describe the tone of the asking. The smell is the detail that keeps coming up. Hungary water, which is basically the Chanel No, 5 of the 1810s except made from rosemary, orange peel, and a floral base that adheres enthusiastically to soft furnishings. The chambermaid smelled it on the landing outside a closed door at 2:30 on a September afternoon. A footman smelled it on a chair cushion that had no business being warm. The perfume makes no effort to be subtle. The perfume is, in court, essentially a co-conspirator. The crim, ton. Trial transcripts read like a survey of a townhouse, conducted by a very determined and socially informed geologist. Back staircases. The distance between the servants' hall and the first-floor landing. Whether the connecting door between the dressing room and the blue bedroom was customarily left ajar or not. Thomas, the under-butler, is precise, patient, and reliably observant. He notes that on 3 separate occasions the connecting door was not ajar. Thomas had apparently been keeping a log, which he had not been asked to keep, which is somehow worse than if he had been asked. None of this is testimony you can answer. You have no standing in this room. The case is between your husband and the man he is suing, and both of them have counsel, and the jury is entirely male, and the pamphlet summarising everything said today will be printed and sold for £1 by Friday. There is a man near Covent Garden who specialises in exactly this kind of pamphlet. He is very good at his work. He has steady hands and a fast compositor. The damages, if awarded, go to your husband. He has, in the eyes of the court, suffered a property loss. Coverture has made your body part of what he holds, and a man who has interfered with that holding owes him for the interference. The settlement negotiation happens between 2 men in a room you are not invited to enter. The carpet in the room is green. The 2 men do not notice the carpet. Mary finishes her testimony. She steps down from the witness box with the composed expression of someone who has said only the truth, which is its own kind of devastation. She will require a reference letter now. The reference letter will have to come from somewhere other than you. You are paying, in pounds and in time, for the only divorce that exists in 1797. The proceeding begins with an ecclesiastical separation, moves through a successful crim, con, action, and ends with a private bill in the House of Lords. 3 years, several £1,000s, your name in the journals of both houses. At the end of it, you may legally marry the man you have already been living with. The royal court will never receive you again. The Queen has views on divorced women. The woman who has done exactly this is Elizabeth Vassall Webster, and she does not look especially sorry about it. She has just married Henry Richard Fox, 3rd Baron Holland, and moved into Holland House in Kensington, a rambling Jacobean pile with enough rooms to host half of Parliament and a garden long enough to lose a minor diplomat in. Lord Holland is a committed Whig. Elizabeth is a committed conversationalist. The combination is by any measure formidable. Of course the cost was real. Sir Godfrey Webster, her first husband, was granted his crim, con, damages before the Lords even convened. Lord Holland paid them. The bill then went through committee, was read 3 times, was debated by men who had opinions about Elizabeth's character, and were not shy about sharing them in print. A parliamentary divorce produces a paper trail the way a muddy dog produces footprints. It gets everywhere. What you lose is not Holland House. That part works out well. What you lose is every royal drawing room in England. Queen Charlotte, wife of George III, has a list. Divorced women are not on the invitation, and the Queen's position on this is both firm and extremely well communicated. Lady Holland will not curtsy to the Queen because Lady Holland will not be admitted to the room where the Queen is standing. This is not a snub, exactly. It's a policy. The policy has never once bent. Miss us. Fitzherbert, who married the Prince of Wales in secret in 1785, which was technically illegal under the Royal Marriages Act, and was then publicly denied by the Prince when he married Princess Caroline of Brunswick in 1795, also doesn't make the list. The list is not published anywhere. Everyone knows what's on it. Lady Holland responds to permanent royal exclusion the way a particularly strategic person responds to a closed door. She builds a better room. By 1800, Holland House on Thursday evenings is the room in London where a Whig politician needs to be seen. Lord Byron comes, Sheridan comes, Talleyrand, exiled from France and watching everything, comes. Macaulay is practically a fixture. Lady Holland seats them, rearranges them, feeds them, argues with them, and edits their opinions in real time between the soup course and the fish. A visiting French diplomat later describes the dinners as something between a cabinet meeting and a theatrical performance, conducted by a woman who has memorized everyone's weak points and considers this good hospitality. Harrison tall, silent, and reliably unimpressed, with the posture of a minor column and the expression of a man who has heard everything and will take it to the grave, carries the evening's written invitations on a tray so heavy it requires both hands. He sets it down and waits. He has waited at Holland House for 11 years. He will wait 11 more. The tray is silver. The invitations are sealed with wax. The seal is the Holland House crest, which has appeared on correspondence sent to more prime ministers than most prime ministers have sent to each other. The Queen's drawing rooms are formal, uncomfortable, and end at a fixed hour. Dinner at Holland House runs until midnight, frequently later, and the conversation is worth remembering. Several people do remember it. Several of them publish it afterward, which Lady Holland finds irritating but not disqualifying. Irritating she can work with. Obscurity she cannot. You are seated at the head of a long table in Kensington at which the Foreign Secretary, the poet, the historian, and the future Prime Minister are passing the salt. Your husband is at the other end. The Queen will not receive you. The drawing rooms of the royal palaces are closed to you. You have responded by building a parallel court at your own dining table, to which the people who matter to England now apply for invitations. The court has noticed. The court has chosen not to notice that it has noticed. Holland House is not a house. It's a Jacobean mansion in 40 acres of grounds in Kensington, set far enough from the city that the air smells like grass instead of coal, and close enough that a carriage from St. James's takes 40 minutes if the horses are cooperative. The rooms are large, the ceilings high, the library serious. Your cook is French. The wine is not an afterthought. Guests arrive on Thursday evenings and occasionally forget to leave until Wednesday. The list is its own kind of weather. Byron comes. Sheridan comes, usually late, often already drinking, always devastating company. Talleyrand comes, which is extraordinary. The man has served the French monarchy, the Revolution, Napoleon, and whoever is currently in charge of France this month, and he finds your table worth the carriage ride. Macaulay comes and talks at considerable length and is mostly allowed to. Lord John Russell comes. Brougham comes. Samuel Rogers comes and says something quietly terrible about everyone present, which everyone present takes as a form of affection. The table seats 30. It is rarely 30. It is occasionally more. You run this the way Lady Jersey runs Almack's, except your criteria are intellectual and political rather than ancestral and inexplicable. The difference is that Lady Jersey can refuse a duke's daughter on the strength of a slight nobody has documented. You can refuse a duke's son on the grounds that he said something dim at dinner in 1809 and you wrote it down. You have a memory for dim remarks. It is not a forgiving memory. A footman named Giles moves down the left side of the table, refilling the claret with the focused calm of a man who has heard 17 state secrets and intends to carry them to his grave like luggage. He doesn't pause at conversations. He doesn't acknowledge them. He has been doing this long enough to know that the conversations are the furniture and he is merely the light fitting. The salon works because you work it. Thursday evenings require preparation that nobody sees. The seating arrangement alone takes an hour, because you cannot place the historian next to the poet they've been publicly dismissing, and you cannot place the Foreign Secretary next to the man who wrote that pamphlet, and you cannot place Talleyrand anywhere he'll be bored, because a bored Talleyrand is a Talleyrand composing observations he will repeat in Paris. You have a system. The system involves small cards and a table diagram and your own handwriting, which is extremely decisive. The exclusion from royal drawing rooms still stands. Queen Charlotte did not reverse decisions. The current arrangement under the Prince Regent is no warmer. You don't attend court presentations. You don't curtsy at the right moment to the right person in the right room. This is not nothing. There are things that exclusion costs you. Quiet hierarchies you cannot enter, doors that stay shut regardless of who is at your table on Thursday. And yet Talleyrand is at your table on Thursday. He has been at the table of Napoleon Bonaparte and found it adequate. He has found yours worth the return journey. The Queen's drawing room has a guest list. Your dining room has a reputation. These are not the same thing, and one of them is growing. The exile was meant to be a consequence. It turned out to be a floor plan.